Well, it's great to have all of you with us today. My name is Chris, one of the pastors here, and we're in this third part of this series, Infinite. And this is really, really important. I think this is important every week, but it's really important today that if you missed parts 1 and 2 of the series, or maybe you're a guest with us for the very first time, so obviously you didn't miss parts 1 or 2, this is your first time here. How we do our weekend services at Tri-County Church is our series, like Infinite. It's one really long message that we break up into 3 parts, 4 parts, or 5 parts. And this is important all the time, but especially for today. Because part 1 and 2 of this entire city wraps itself around where we're going today. So promise me this: if you miss 1 or 2, or if you're a guest with us, and so this is your first time with us, please go to tcconline.tv and make sure you watch 1 and 2. Now, you're not going to be lost today, know that, but the context of parts 1 and 2 is so critical to where we're going in our time together now. Now, for all of us, we consciously or subconsciously, with the important or the unimportant, we are constantly, just through the normal rhythm of our day, we're putting things in some type of hierarchical order. Whether you, again, realize it or not, this is just something we all do. And take, for instance, the number one question that gets asked every day of every week, especially if you have kids. This is the annoying question. If you are in the workplace and you're going with your coworkers, this question gets asked. If you're married, this question gets asked. If you're dating someone, this question gets asked. And there's the question. The question is, what are we going to eat? Right? Right? The question gets asked, and as soon as the question gets asked, people will say, I don't care, and then people start throwing out options, and in reality, everyone cares, right? And let's just say you're in a car and you're driving somewhere and you're like, what do you want to eat? And all of a sudden people say sushi, tacos, and spaghetti. Quickly, right now, you have it in an order. You have it in a hierarchy order right now. If these are the 3 options, you're thinking to yourself, not that one. Yeah, I'm really craving. 2 weeks ago, it was a Friday. My wife and I, our Fridays is our date day. It's my one day off. And so Fridays, we get the kids off to school, and then we just have the day together. It's awesome. And then kind of Friday evenings is time with our family. So it's kind of Fridays is our day. And so we got the kids off to school, and all of a sudden, it was probably 7:30 in the morning. My wife said to me, honey, you know what I'm craving? And here's the thing. If you like this food, you understand the craving. And if you don't like this food, you don't understand this. She said to me, honey, I am craving sushi. Now, if you love sushi, you know the craving. The rest of y'all, you're like, sushi is disgusting. Why would anyone ever crave sushi? But if you like it, and when we moved to this area, we had this concern because we're like, we just didn't think that central Pennsylvania would have great sushi. So we thought to ourselves, well, we're going to have to travel to find great sushi. And then we discovered in Du Bois, Japan won. Oh, that is some good sushi. So it's 7:30 in the morning. We have this craving. And if we could have ate sushi for breakfast, we would have eaten sushi for breakfast. We didn't. We waited until 11 a.m. and we were the first one there, right? First one, and it was, again, if you like sushi, you understand this experience. It was epic, right? But think about it, right? You have an order. For some of you, I mean, you don't want to put sushi 3. You want to put it like at the very bottom of the list, but we do this. When it comes to sports, if I said, put these 3 in some hierarchical order, you're doing it right now. You have your list, and I'm pretty sure none of you are trying to compete for the number 1 spot between football and gymnastics. None of you are doing that. If you're a gymnastics fan, it's number 1, and you don't watch football. And if you're a football fan, I know this is stereotype. I'm pretty sure you're not going, well, football game, gymnastics. Which one do I want to watch, right? Put it in order. When it comes to vacation destinations, what order do you put them in? Big city, mountains, and beach. Right now, you got your order. For me, I love the beach, except for one thing. And this one thing pushes the beach way down my list. If I could have a beach that didn't have sand, epic. The thing, right? Sand gets everywhere. And then you have to work for weeks after the beach removing sand from everywhere. Right? I love the mountains. I love the mountains. We had a cabin in Utah sitting at 9,500 feet. I love the mountain. There's just nothing like the mountain. When it comes to holidays, what's number one? Christmas? Thanksgiving? Easter? Right? Some of you are like Thanksgiving freaks. You love everything about Thanksgiving. For those of you like me, I just want to let you know, Christmas is the number one holiday of all time. And there's 304 days until Christmas. Just want to share that with all of you. Right? There's just an order we place things in. And so today, Jesus, well, he's going to say there's another order. It's not between three things. It's between two things. And he's going to say there's an order, there's a hierarchy, and what gets the number one spot? Because we know there's only room for one number one spot. There's only room for one number one place. And Jesus is going to say, is it God or is it? And we'll get to the second thing. Because it's these two things, and which one is going to do number one? Now, Jesus was a master storyteller. And in the New Testament, this type of story was called a parable. And a parable, what it was this fictitious story with a moral, ethical, spiritual takeaway, spiritual truth attached to it. And 2,000 years ago, the Jewish rabbi, the spiritual teacher, the spiritual leaders of those of that culture, they were kind of graded on, so to speak, on how proficient they were in storytelling. So the greater parable storyteller you were, right, they would kind of rank you higher because it was a great way to teach people, to draw people in and teach them a spiritual truth, a spiritual action, a moral, ethical pathway to go down. And here's the thing with Jesus. Over and over again, people respected Jesus highly for his ability to teach, for his ability to tell stories, parables. Even if someone wasn't sure if he really was the Messiah, and most people had a question mark around that until they saw him die and then they saw him alive. But they knew, they respected Jesus as a storyteller, as a proficient teacher. And in these New Testament parables, there was usually always at least two characters, and sometimes there's 3, 4, or more characters. But one of the things you have to realize with every parable had these at least two characters, and each one of these characters always represented one of these two people. One character always represented God. So God was in every parable. The other person that always was represented was you, me. The people in the audience, the people Jesus was talking to. So one of the things when you encounter a parable, you have to ask yourself, okay, out of all the characters, who is God and who represents me? What character represents God and what character represents me? You just got to do it. The second thing that you want to kind of do when you are looking at these New Testament parables is to go, what is the central point? What is the central takeaway? What is the point that I need to apply to my life and move into action? So as we go through this parable, the story that Jesus is going to tell today, I'm just going to say, try to figure out, and you'll figure this out, who is God, who represents God, and who represents you, and then what is the central takeaway to that? So Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he goes, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So here's the two central characters already, rich man and a manager. And the rich man finds out that the one person that he put in charge of overseeing all of his land, the one person that he put in charge of overseeing all of his wealth, the one person that he had put in charge of overseeing all of his investments, the one person that he placed all his trust in and placed all of his wealth, money, possession stuff, was wasting it. And so he calls him in. He says, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be my manager any longer. You are fired. Your job's done because I can't trust you anymore. Place all my trust in you, and you've been wasting all of my wealth. Now, how do you think this manager responded? How would you respond? If you've ever been fired from a job, how did you respond? If you ever found out that your position was being dissolved, how did you respond? If you ever found out that your company was being liquidated or closed or in bankruptcy or being purchased, how did you respond? If all of a sudden you realized you had a really good paying job and all of a sudden now that job is going away, how would you respond? Well, the same way this manager responded. He said, what shall I do now? Right? Isn't that the response? Now what? You see, he had a very lucrative job. He had a very cushy job. I mean, he had to sit there and just make sure that he was making his boss a lot of money. He sat behind a nice desk. He didn't have to work out in the hot sun. I mean, he had a great job. And now he's thinking to himself, I've built my entire life around this standard of this job, and now what can I do? What am I going to do? I'm not sure what's coming next. But implied in the story is that the rich man kind of gave him a period of time, kind of gave him a 2 weeks notice to close everything down, to end all the agreements that he had out there, to finish all the paperwork. There was this period of time that the rich man gave the manager to wrap up his job before he was done. And so as this manager was thinking, what do I do now? His mind starts to wander, and he starts to think, well, my master's taking away my job, and I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. As he was looking at his options, he's like, I don't want to go back and be a day laborer. I don't want to work out in the sun. I don't have the strength. I'm getting older in my age. Like, I don't want to start at the bottom rung again, and beyond that, I'm not going to beg. And so he's circling around. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all of a sudden the light bulb comes on. He goes, I know what I'll do. When I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their homes. And the idea was all around him figuring out how can he, with all of the business agreements from all of these different people that he had arranged for his boss, the rich man, how could he develop some goodwill? How could he develop some kindness? How could he develop an emotional tether so that when his employment comes to an end, he had a group of people that would, just have him over for dinner. That would give him a place to stay, that maybe would give him another job to do, that would show him a certain level of reciprocation, of kindness. So he sets his plan into motion, and he calls in each one of his master's debtors, and he asks the first one, how much do you owe my master? And the person replied, 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. And he looked at the bill and he goes, sit down quickly. You can feel the urgency. He's like, come on. We got to get this done now. I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to do something that's going to be, it's going to blow your mind. I'm going to do something that you're going to be so thankful for. But we got to get this done now because I don't want my master to come in. I want my master to know what we're doing. You don't want to know what my master is doing. Like, we got to do this quickly. And he said, well, let's take your bill and cut it in half. Cut it in half. Could you imagine if you got that phone call today? Just out of nowhere, someone called you and said, hey, you know your mortgage? Cut in half. Car loans, cut in half. Credit card bill, cut in half. I mean, you would do a happy dance, which I would like to see right now. Stand up and dance. Right? I mean, can you feel that? I mean, this wasn't just a small little portion. I mean, he cut it in half. Then he brings in the second person. He goes, hey, how much do you owe? And the person said, well, I owe 1,000 bushels of wheat. And he replied, he told him, well, take your bill and make it 800. 20%. Someone sat down and looked at both of these amounts, and they kind of went back and did some research and did a whole bunch of work. And what they discovered is both of these reductions were almost the same amount of money when they looked at prices of goods and what they would trade for and all of that some 2,000 years ago. And when they looked and they found out these were basically the same type of financial impact for these debtors, they also discovered that this would kind of equate to 16 months of a day laborer's wage. I mean, this is significant. And then the master. The master heard about this. The master found out about it. The master discovered what he was doing. If you were the master, how would you respond? Come on. I know how I would respond. I mean, if this is my situation and I've already fired the guy, I gave him just enough time to close everything down because he's been wasting my money, he's been wasting my property, he's been wasting my wealth, he's been wasting my possessions. And I'm like, I just want you to wrap it up and I want you to be gone because I can't trust you. And then you hear that he's doing that. Come on, I know how you'd respond. You would be livid. So Jesus has his disciples, they're all leaning in. They're all leaning in because they all know how they would respond if they were the master. And then Jesus goes, the master commended. What? The master high-fived. The master fist bumped. The master brought him into his office, sat him down, put his arm around him, was like, man, bro, like, way to go. Like, I'm impressed. The disciples are going, what? What master would do that? And she goes, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. He had acted with savviness. He had acted cunningly. He had applied a great amount of intelligence. At this point, the disciples, and maybe you are, kind of scratching your head going, yeah. Where is Jesus going with this story, this parable? But you see, what Jesus was highlighting at this moment, and this is still not the truth, the takeaway, that spiritual action that we need to apply to our lives. He's not there yet, but what Jesus was highlighting was a money manager was commended for maximizing his limited time and opportunity. That he was highlighting the fact that guess what? He realized that this manager who had just lost his job, that he had been given his pink slip, his 2 weeks notice, that he applied all of this savviness in this limited amount of time, this limited opportunity to set up his future better. And Jesus said, hey, you got to give him a high five for that. And then Jesus pulls out of this parable, he backs out of this fictitious story, and he starts to teach. And he says, the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. These two groups of people, the people of light represents the Jewish people, the people who were following God, the people who believed in God's promises, the people that were committed to following God's pathway. That's the people of light. And the people of the world, people that aren't committed to following God's pathway, people that aren't focused on following in God's footsteps, the people who aren't focused on God's promises, the people who are, focused on themselves. What's good for them? Me-centric people. People that are like, what's good for me? What's best for me? It's about my life, my career, my wealth, my possessions, what I want, where I want to go. And Jesus just said, hey, by the way, there's people in the world who are more shrewd in dealing with their own than people who are following God. And then Jesus gives a command, an imperative, a directive. He says, I tell you. Now, if you are not a Jesus follower, this command doesn't apply to you. If you haven't named Jesus the subject of your life, I'm just telling you, like this command, it's not for you. But if you are a Jesus follower, Jesus is the subject of your life. This is directed right at you. And maybe you've never heard these words before. Maybe you've never read this parable before. Maybe you've never interacted with this parable before. Maybe right now you're thinking to yourself, where is this going? Maybe you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but Tri-County really isn't my church. I'm just visiting. I really go to another church, so this doesn't have to follow me out of here. I'm just telling you. This is not a church thing. This is not a religion thing. This is if Jesus is a subject of your life thing, this is directed right at you, just like it's directed right at me. And Jesus said, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. He said, leverage your stuff. Leverage your possessions. Leverage your money. Leverage what's in your hands now for an eternal impact. You have a limited amount of time here on this earth. Remember, the shrewd manager maximized his limited time and his limited opportunity. And Jesus is like, hey, you got to ask yourself this question. How can you leverage what you have to make an eternal difference with the time you have? I mean, this is a question that's right at the center of what Jesus is saying. We all have a limited amount of time. So what's been placed in your hands, what you have, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it to make an eternal difference? But Jesus isn't done yet, because he's still heading towards the point. And he says, whoever can be trusted with very little can be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? And then he gets to the point of this entire parable. No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. That there's a hierarchy. And remember, there's only one number one spot. The question is this: who or what is in your number one spot? And Jesus is making it really clear. It's between these two, God and money. There's not a number three, not a number four. But the chief competitor for your heart, for my heart, is either God or my money, God or my stuff, God or my possessions. What is number one? Jesus believed this so much that out of the 35 to 38 some odd parables, and it depends on how you count them and how you position them, what number you land on. But between those number of parables that Jesus taught that are recorded in our New Testament Bible, do you know how many of them focused on money, possessions, stuff? 16 of them. 16 out of that 35 to 38 some parables that Jesus told that are recorded focused on money. And this is a real important clarification, especially where we're going next. It has nothing to do with how much money you make or how little money you make. Some of you make a whole bunch of money. Some of you wish you made a whole bunch of money. Some of you make itty bitty amount of money. Don't convince yourself. Don't fool yourself. Don't start thinking yourself, especially where we're going next. Don't start thinking yourself, if I made more, if I made more, this would all be different. No, this has nothing to do with the amount of money you make, the amount of money I make. This has everything to do with priority. Is money going to be your master, or is God going to be your master? Are you going to master your money, or is money going to master you? What is a priority order? And there is a priority order for all of your money. And for the vast majority, and I'm just going to pick on Americans here, the vast majority of Americans, this is the priority order. Priority number one is live. Is all of your expenses, all your debt, all your stuff, all your possessions. And as an afterthought comes saving and giving. How much are you living off of right now? Do you know? For many, many Americans, they're living off of a high 90% of all of their money. Some of you are living off of 103%. And some are like, how can you do that? It's called credit card. Your expenses are so high. Why? Because your money, your stuff is number one. Number one. And now your finances are so upside down, so upside down. The average American has really zero clue of what they're saving and what they're giving. That might be your story right now. The average American couldn't right now today, if they had a $400 emergency, let's say their car, the radiator blew up. I don't know if radiators can blow up, but let's say they can, right? The only way they could pay for that $400 emergency is by credit card because they do not have enough emergency cash because they're not saving. And do you know the average American only gives 2.8% to charity? And usually they discover that amount when they do their taxes. 2.8. And again, you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, but Chris, like, man, finances are so tight. And if I made more money, I want to be generous. I want to be generous. If I made more money, I would give more. But guess what happens? The data doesn't prove that thought correct. I'm just telling you. Don't fool yourself. Don't convince yourself. If you make more than $100,000 a year, do you know what happens to the average percentage rate to charity? It goes down to 2.6%. Jeff Bezos gave $146 million to charity. And on the surface, that number is massive because I'm sure if you're like me, I'm like, I want to be his charity. Give me $1 million. Just one out of the 146, I'll take it. He gave $146 million. But when you slide that number next to his $160 billion, well, it equates to this. Per $100,000 that he makes, do you know how much he gives to charity? $90.06. This isn't about the amount of money. It has everything to do with who is your master. Last week, part 2 of this series, we looked at another parable. And there was an action out of that parable. And I made this emphatic statement that this entire parable, this entire story that Jesus told had nothing to do with money. It had to do with one thing, surrender. And that's true. Absolutely a true statement. But you know what was at the center of surrender? Money. Remember the order that Jesus gave to the rich young man? Jesus did not say to him, hey, come follow me, and as you follow me, we're going to work out your finances. Jesus didn't say to the rich young man, hey, join the circle. You're now in the inner circle. Hey, come enjoy the experience, and along the way, we're going to talk about your possessions and money and giving to the poor. We'll get there. The order is critical. Jesus didn't say, yep, come with me, then we will. Jesus said, no, first, I want to know who is your master. So go, sell everything, give it away, then come follow me. If you want God to be number one, if you want God to be your master, if you don't want your money to master you, you have to switch, live, and give. And give God first. Right when you get paid, you give some away. Right when the money comes in, you give a predetermined number away. The Bible talks about this word called the tithe. It just means 10%. It's not a miracle number, but it is a guide to say, is money your master or is God your master? For some of you, I mean, today, there's zero chance because you are max live at 99%. But there is a percentage that you start saying, God, right away, right when money comes in, I'm going to give it away. For some of you, you've been at 10% for so long, and God's like, no, there's more, because you have more to give. And if you're thinking right now that this is a give to Tri-County Church thing, you're wrong. This is about who is your master thing. I'm fine if there's another church that you believe in their vision, you believe in their mission, they're making Jesus the subject, they're serving their local community, they're getting it done. Go to that church, walk into the pastor's office, shut the door and say, hey, I don't go here, but I want to tithe to your church. That pastor will probably have a heart attack or do a happy dance. I'm not sure which one. Right? But if you are a Jesus follower, the church is the hope of the world that Jesus set in motion to tell everyone about him. The church, a gathering of people, is the vehicle. If you're a Christ follower, you give your first to God through a local church. If you're not a Christ follower, find an amazing nonprofit that's truly impacting local communities. Find a nonprofit that's getting it done. And oh, by the way, I might be biased. But I believe that Tri-County Church in all of our local communities is one of those nonprofits that's so highly committed to serving local communities. I just think we're a great nonprofit for you to give to. Just from what we're doing, how we're impacting local communities. But again, if you're not a Christ follower, find that nonprofit and give to. But here's the challenge. Choose a percentage. A percentage that makes you go, because if you don't, I'm just telling you, your money will continue to master you. And once you have that percentage that you give away at the very front, right when you get paid, you give it away. You get paid, you give it away. You get paid, you give it away. I'm telling you, it's a massive step to putting God first and making sure your money doesn't master you. Then you save next. Save next. Goal, minimum 10%. How do you get there? And some of you are like, there's no way, Chris. Well, maybe there's decisions you need to make right now to start bringing your expenses down. And then you live off the rest. Live off the rest. There's a tool that we're going to, every one of you is going to get here in a few moments. And there's two parts of this tool, and I want to highlight one, and I will highlight the second part, but I want to highlight this first part, and it simply says, in 2019, I will excel in irrational generosity by committing to giving God my first, saving next, and living off the rest. What I'm going to ask you to do, is just to write your name on it. Your commitment this year, now, to say, God, I want you to be my master. And I'm tired of my money mastering me. God, I'm going to put you first, and it's going to take me some time, or maybe you can get there now, but it's going to take me time to unwire years of poor decision making. But God, I'm just telling you right now, my commitment, and it's going to start with me giving a predetermined percentage of what comes in back to you, understanding. I have limited time and limited opportunity to make an eternal, significant difference. God, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. For some of you, your finances are so upside down that starting this week at our Du Bois Hill campus, we're offering financial peace. And I want to encourage you, sign up for it. Come to it. If you're online, just jump in. If you're interested in it, let our online host know. If you're at our North Central campus, let Casey, our campus pastor, know that, your interest. But we're kicking it off this week. But I want you to know, the framework around financial peace is give first, save next, and live off the rest. Live off the rest. Your first step, you say, God, I'm going to put you number one. I'm going to put you number one. When Jesus started this parable, this story, it was clear that he was talking to his disciples. But we get towards the end of this parable, and all of a sudden there's another group of people. And so we don't know how big the crowd around Jesus, but we know the disciples were there. But there was this other group of people. They're called the Pharisees. They were the the religious elite. They were the religious experts. And the Pharisees, who loved money, heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus. It's that tension inside. Some of you right now, hands are sweaty, heart's racing. You're like, I hope he wraps this up now. I got to get out of here. Why? Why? Like, pay attention to that. Why is that such a big emotional? Because the chief competitor for your heart is your stuff. And Jesus said to these Pharisees, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. Another point Jesus said, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. There is an extraordinary way to live a timeless life. When you realize the Master has given you everything that you have. And with your limited time and your limited opportunity here on this earth, you can make an eternal difference. But who is going to be your master? So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask all of you to stay seated. The team's going to come back, and we're going to have a time of worship. But I want you to spend time on this, just one half of this card. If you're married as a couple, join together on this card. But in your time, your conversation with God, it's the one question. Are you going to make God the master? If so, write your name, write your initials, scribble, make a mark. You're saying, God, I'm going to commit to